Another learning community that's very close to my heart is what we call the Legacy and Generational Discipleship Ministry. One of the major areas within that is called grandparenting with a purpose. So, why grandparents? Because in many families, grandparents play a much larger role in the lives of their children than we sometimes recognize. When my wife and I moved into an area that is predominantly a retirement community, in this community, there are people whose children are literally 20 to 30 hours driving each way away from where they live. So, in essence, the grandparents have no interactions with these children except for flying for hours at a time when their resources allow to be able to go visit. But there's also occasions where grandparents are raising children now because the children can't afford to go to work and pay to keep the children in a daycare or have some after school care because of cost. So as a result, grandparents are playing a more and more significant role everywhere around the world. That's why we developed this material. And once we did, I realized if it helps us here, it may indeed help in Mzansi. Sometimes employment can take a parent away, and some families have experienced separation and other challenges. And now Uma and grandma and grandpa, aren't simply visiting the grandchildren, they're helping to raise them. They're getting them ready for school, they're feeding them, they're correcting them and encouraging them. They're helping to shape the people that these young children are becoming. And that means grandparents have an extraordinary opportunity, not simply to help raise another generation, but to help disciple another generation. We've been developing this ministry in the US because we've discovered something very important. Us grandparents need tools too. Loving your grandchild comes naturally, but intentionally helping to shape their spiritual life sometimes require us to think differently about our role. The 145th Psalm says, "One generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts." That's generational discipleship. And one of my favorite biblical examples is Timothy himself. Paul reminds Timothy of the sincere faith that first lived in his grandmother, Lois, and then his mother, Eunice, and now lived in Timothy. Think about that. Before Timothy ever became the young leader we read about in Scripture, there was a grandmother in his spiritual story. And that's why this ministry focuses on practical ways grandparents can intentionally pass faith from one generation to another. We talk about leaving a spiritual legacy. A legacy isn't simply what you leave someone when you die. Legacy is what you leave somebody while you're still living. That's rich, isn't it? We help grandparents think about the stories of God's faithfulness in their own lives that their grandchildren need to know. Write them down, record them. Tell your grandchildren about prayers God answered. Tell them about the times you struggled. Tell them how God carried you through. Because someday those stories may become part of the spiritual foundation upon which that child stands. And we also teach grandparents how to build devotional time with their grandchildren. That doesn't mean that you have to sit a 6-year-old down for a 45-minute Bible study. It might mean just simply reading the Bible together. It might be one scripture verse at breakfast. It might be one of those multimedia videos. It might be asking, "What would you like grandma to pray with you about today?" It can even be done across the miles through WhatsApp or a video call. Our material teaches grandparents how to use technology intentionally. There's so much more that I can share, but I'm trying to make sure that I stay concise and do this within a 5-minute window. Grandparents shouldn't have to figure all of this out by themselves. Churches can equip them. They learn, they pray together, they exchange ideas, they encourage one another. That's why this belongs within the Timothy Project. But once again, this is about multiplication, faith moving from one generation to another, grandparents pouring into grandchildren. It's about leaving with them a faith that points them toward Jesus Christ. That's what we mean by grandparenting with a purpose. Hopefully, you've found something of value in this But you know what? There's even more. Stick around. We've got a couple of more pieces to this that we're going to be sharing. This material will also be digitally provided to those that come to the conference in May. An overview is going to take place in the October sessions in Cape Town as we're setting up the vision launch and strategy meetings. Hope to see you there. Enjoy.